A desperate single mother is humiliated in a fancy restaurant. Then a wealthy man invites her to dinner, and their lives change forever. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The biting wind of Chicago seemed to pierce through every layer that winter night. The streets slick with rain, reflecting the neon glow of signs and the blur of cars speeding by, indifferent to anyone else's suffering. Snow had just started to fall, clinging to the messy hair of Emily Hart, a 31-year-old woman clutching the tiny frozen hand of her 5-year-old son Jonah. Jonah's wide green eyes, so much like his mother's, were filled with tears. He shook from more than just the cold. He was starving. His stomach growled loudly, almost like it was crying out for help, which made Emily shut her eyes tight, press her lips together, and hold back the tears threatening to spill. Each uncertain step down the sidewalk of the city that never truly sees its most invisible souls felt like her heart was breaking. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Jonah whispered, his voice so faint it nearly vanished into the wind. Emily knelt down, wrapped her arms around him, and kissed his freezing forehead, trying to give him a sliver of safety. She barely felt like herself anymore. "I know, sweetheart. I know. Mommy's gonna figure something out, okay? I promise," she said, swallowing the thick lump rising in her throat. But how? How could she keep a promise like that when she was alone? No home, no job, no one left in the world? Jonah's father had abandoned them before the boy turned 4. Disappearing without a trace, like they were disposable. Like love could just vanish when life got hard. Since then, Emily had fought every single day to shield her son from a world that no longer cared they existed. Every turn met them with a closed door, a blank stare, a turn back. It had been 3 days since they'd had a proper meal, just scraps picked up wherever they could. 3 days of Emily trying to stay strong, but Jonah was too weak now. He couldn't wait anymore. As they turned a bustling corner in downtown Chicago, Emily saw the golden lights of an upscale restaurant, Bernard's Table. The smell of grilled steak, warm bread, and rich butter floated through the revolving glass doors, and it made Jonah's empty stomach clench painfully. She stood frozen for a few seconds, staring at the place that felt like it belonged to another universe, a world where people laughed, raised their glasses, and ate without a single worry. Her eyes filled with tears. But something inside her, maybe a mother's instinct, maybe just sheer desperation, made her take a deep breath, squeeze Jonah's tiny hand, and step inside. As soon as they passed through the revolving door, the warm sound of clinking silverware and soft, elegant conversation filled their ears. But within seconds, it was replaced by a cold silence. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. A woman in a deep green satin gown and a string of pearls discreetly covered her nose, frowning as though she had caught a whiff of something foul. A couple at the next table whispered, scanning Emily from head to toe, her threadbare coat, scuffed boots, and the faded scarf wrapped around Jonah's neck. Jonah gripped his mother's hand tighter, shrinking beside her, feeling as small as a leaf in a storm. A waiter in a black vest, hair slicked back with precision and eyes heavy with contempt, marched toward them before Emily could even open her mouth. He crossed his arms, blocking their path. "Are you lost, ma'am?" he asked, his tone soaked in sarcasm. Emily took a shaky breath, her face flushed with shame. She swallowed hard and, voice trembling, said, "Please, just a plate of food." She nodded toward Jonah, who by now could barely stay on his feet. "It's for him. I'll pay. As soon as I can. Please." The waiter raised an eyebrow and gave a short, dry laugh. "This isn't the kind of place for people like you. We don't do charity. Got it?" he snapped, loud enough for others to hear. Some guests chuckled, others looked away, pretending not to notice. "Please, I'm begging you. Just one plate for my son," Emily pleaded, her eyes burning, her pride crumbling with each word. The waiter shook his head impatiently. "Out. Now. Before I call security. You're disturbing our customers." Jonah squeezed his eyes shut and buried his face against Emily's coat as his empty stomach growled again, drawing looks of disdain from another nearby table. Then suddenly, a deep, commanding voice cut through the room like thunder. "That is not going to happen." Silence spread like fire. Everything froze. Forks stopped midair. All heads turned toward the figure standing at the farthest corner of the room. It was Maxwell Reed. tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and a navy silk tie. His dark blonde hair fell casually over his forehead, and his eyes, those intense hazel eyes that seemed capable of piercing through any wall. He was a man who radiated power, commanded respect, and carried an aura of quiet authority that made anyone hesitate before challenging him. He moved toward the center of the dining room, his steps echoing with purpose, his stare burning with indignation. The waiter visibly shrank. "Mr. Reed," the employee stammered, turning pale. "Silence," Maxwell snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is how you treat a mother and a hungry child? With contempt? With humiliation?" he said, his tone icy. He turned, slowly scanning the room, making direct eye contact with every person who had chuckled or turned away moments ago. "This place," he gestured across the elegant dining room, "means nothing if there's no humanity within these walls." Maxwell took a deep breath, reining in his fury, though his voice stayed steady and cold. "You, and anyone who stood by and allowed this disgrace to happen, are fired, effective immediately." A wave of gasps swept through the restaurant. The manager, pale and sweating, rushed forward. "Mr. Reed, please, this has to be some misunderstanding." "We can." Maxwell raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "There's no misunderstanding, and if you try to excuse the inexcusable, you'll be joining them." The manager swallowed hard and bowed his head. Then, just as quickly as the storm had risen, Maxwell's expression softened. His severe features melted into something gentler, unexpected, almost tender. He turned to Emily, and the coldness in his eyes transformed into warmth. "Please," he said, extending a hand toward her, his voice now calm and gentle. "Join me. Let's have dinner together." Emily blinked, confused, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. She looked down at Jonah, whose wide eyes stared up at her, then back at the man who now appeared as a rare moment of calm in the chaos of their life. "I don't even know what to say," Emily stammered, clutching Jonah to her chest. Maxwell smiled, softly. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just let yourself, both of you, be treated how you deserve, at least for tonight." He crouched down to Jonah's level, his voice gentler still. "Hey, little man, you're hungry, huh?" Jonah, still partly hiding behind Emily's legs, nodded shyly. "Then let's fix that," Maxwell said, reaching out his hand to him. Emily, still hesitant, looked around. The same diners who had mocked them now avoided her eyes, pretending to be absorbed in their meals. The waiter who had tried to force them out stood red-faced, staring at the floor, desperate to disappear. Emily took a slow breath. And for the first time in what felt like weeks, maybe months, she felt a sensation she had nearly forgotten: safety. She took Maxwell's hand. He led them to his table, the most private one in the restaurant, enclosed with soft curtains and bathed in warm lighting. As soon as they sat down, he gave a discreet signal, and a different waiter, visibly nervous, hurried over. "Bring the best from the menu." "And make it quick," Maxwell said, never taking his eyes off Emily and Jonah. Then he leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table, and spoke in that calm, steady voice that seemed to melt even the iciest hearts. "You're safe now. As long as I'm here, no one will treat you like that again." Emily's heart tightened. Her eyes welled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from relief. Something within her shifted at that very moment. What she didn't know yet was that this dinner would change her life forever. Sitting at that elegantly set table, glowing under golden lights from the delicate chandeliers above, she still wasn't sure if it was all real, or if it was just a dream. The glasses sparkled, the silverware shimmered under the warm glow of the room. And for a brief moment, the noise of the street, the biting cold, and the ache of hunger all felt far away, like another world. Jonah, with his messy dark hair falling over his forehead, was captivated. His large green eyes, shining like stars, were fixed on the plate just set before him. A bowl of fettuccine pasta blanketed in creamy sauce, topped with golden slices of grilled chicken and a dusting of freshly shaved parmesan. For the first time in days, Jonah smiled, a wide, genuine smile that lit up everything around him. Maxwell, seated beside him, leaned in. He picked up the crisp white cloth napkin, and with a tenderness unexpected from a man of such presence, gently placed it across Jonah's lap. "There we go, young man. Now you won't get that awesome outfit dirty," he said with a playful wink that made Jonah giggle bashfully. Then, Maxwell picked up the utensils, placed the knife just right, and carefully began cutting the chicken into small bites, mixing them with the pasta to make it easier for Jonah to eat. Emily watched, eyes filled with emotion, her chest tightening. It was rare, maybe even the very first time, that someone had treated Jonah with such care, as though he were genuinely precious. The difference between this moment and what had happened just minutes earlier was so vast it barely felt real. "He's adorable," Maxwell said, looking up at Emily with a smile that wasn't like the ones the world usually gave. This one felt sincere. Deeply sincere. Emily took a shaky breath, clasped her hands in her lap and spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't even know how to thank you. As soon as I find a job, I'll pay you back every penny." Her voice cracked, caught between gratitude, shame, and fear. Maxwell shook his head gently, his smile softening. "Don't worry about that," he said kindly, his words steady and reassuring. This is just kindness, and honestly, it's less than you deserve." Jonah, unaware of the heaviness of the conversation, was clumsily spinning his fork, trying to copy the way he had seen others do it. Maxwell noticed, and once more leaned in, showing him how to twist the noodles the right way. "Like this, watch," he said, guiding Jonah's tiny fingers. "Turn it slowly, there you go, you're getting good at this." Jonah beamed, proud of himself, and for the first time, laughed. A pure, bright laugh that made Emily cover her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back the sob rising inside her. But not from sadness this time. This time, the tears came from relief, from gratitude, from a spark of hope she hadn't even realized still lived inside her. Slowly, the conversation began to flow. Maxwell didn't question her with cold curiosity like an investigator, but with genuine warmth, as someone who truly wanted to understand, to listen, to help. He listened, really listened, without interrupting, without judgment. At first, Emily was cautious, but little by little, her guard began to fall. She told him how, after a difficult pregnancy, Jonah's father had vanished without a trace, how she lost her job shortly after maternity leave ended, and how there was no one to care for her son. She shared the story of months spent knocking on doors, desperate for work, the nights in overcrowded shelters, the long days begging for help on freezing streets. Her voice cracked more than once. Sometimes the words just wouldn't come, choked by the sheer weight of everything she'd carried alone. Under the table, Maxwell clenched his fists, his jaw tightened. The calm in his eyes was now replaced by a restrained fury. "No mother should ever have to go through this. None," he said, every word firm and deliberate, like a verdict. He took a long breath and turned his head briefly, as if collecting himself. When he looked back at her, his gaze burned with quiet determination. "Emily, I own a few apartments around the city," he said. "I usually rent them out, but I want you and Jonah to stay in one of them. No rent, no pressure, for as long as you need, until you're on your feet." The fork slipped from Emily's hand, clinking gently against her plate. "What?" she whispered, blinking as though she hadn't heard him right. "No, I can't accept that. It's too much. You don't even know me." She shook her head, eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Yes, you can. And you should," he said, his voice steady but kind. "This isn't charity. This is what any decent person should do." Emily clasped her hands together in her lap, her shoulders hunched, overwhelmed with shame, guilt, and disbelief. And then, without meaning to, the words tumbled out, an eruption of all the pain she'd buried for so long. "It's all my fault. If I were stronger, if I had made better choices, he wouldn't be suffering like this." Her voice broke, and the tears, silent and hot, began to pour down her cheeks. Her face crumpled, but Maxwell didn't hesitate. He reached across the table, took her hands in his, strong but gentle, and looked into her eyes like he could see straight into her soul. "No, don't say that. This is not your fault, Emily." His voice was firm, but threaded with compassion. "The fault lies with the people who left you, with those who promised us to stand by you and then vanished, with a system that turns its back on people like you. You're stronger than you know. You made it through all of this, and you didn't just survive, you protected your son, and he's here, smiling, because you are an extraordinary mother." The silence that followed wasn't awkward or empty, it was sacred. The kind of silence that wraps around you like warmth. When dinner ended, Maxwell stood, adjusted his jacket, and with a soft smile held out his hand toward Emily. "Come on, I'll take you there." The walk to the car was peaceful. Jonah held Maxwell's hand like he'd known him forever. Maxwell guided him with the same care someone might use with something precious and irreplaceable. As they passed through the restaurant's entrance, the staff stepped aside, shame written all over their faces. The manager started to mumble something, but one look from Maxwell silenced him instantly. Inside the SUV, a sleek, warm black vehicle, Jonah looked around in awe. Maxwell didn't say much as he started the engine. Instead, he reached into the glove box and pulled out an old photograph. It was of a young woman, smiling, her hazel eyes nearly identical to his. He gazed at it quietly for a moment, his thumb tracing the image, then whispered so softly Emily barely caught the words. I really hope I'm doing the right thing." Emily didn't fully understand. She wanted to ask, but didn't. There was something in the look on his face, something heavy, some story not yet told. The apartment was in a quiet neighborhood. The building was clean and modern, understated but welcoming. When he opened the door, Emily had to cover her mouth to stop the sob rising in her chest. The living room was spotless, softly lit, with a plush couch, a TV, and a large bin of brand-new toys, blocks, cars, dolls. She gasped, hand to her lips. "I stopped at a store on the way," Maxwell said casually, like it was nothing. "Figured Jonah might like a few things." Jonah ran straight to the toys, laughing with delight. His green eyes lit up, bursting with wonder, like a sky full of fireworks. For the first time, Emily saw him simply be a child. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, each with freshly made beds, soft blankets, a stocked fridge, and neatly folded clothes laid out. Later, after Maxwell had left and the door clicked quietly shut behind him, Emily stood in the middle of the small living room, frozen. It was warm, safe, full of light. Yet she felt like a stranger inside her own life. She sat slowly on the edge of the couch, staring at the toys scattered on the floor and the quiet joy echoing from the bedroom where Jonah played. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edges of her coat. She hadn't taken it off. It was as if removing it would make the moment vanish, like it was all a fragile dream. The silence now wasn't sacred. It was loud, full of questions she couldn't shake. Why her? Why would someone like Maxwell do this? How long would it last? What if it all disappeared tomorrow? The fear, buried beneath the hunger and exhaustion for so long, now surged forward in the comfort. The voice in her mind, cold, relentless, whispered that she didn't deserve this, that it was a mistake. She pressed the card Maxwell had given her to her chest, not out of comfort, but like someone bracing for impact, for the other shoe to drop. And yet, she whispered to herself, "Please, just let this be real." Then Maxwell pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to her. "My number's on here. Anything. Anything at all. Emily, you call me. Don't even hesitate." She held the card like someone clinging to a lifeline in the middle of a storm. As he said goodbye, Maxwell knelt down, looked Jonah in the eyes, gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and said, "Take care, buddy. And promise me, you're going to play a lot here, okay?" Jonah nodded right away, clutching one of the little toy cars tightly in his hand. As the door closed, Emily stood still, watching her son, watching the miracle that had unfolded right in front of her. She took a deep breath, looked up at the ceiling, pressed the card to her chest, and whispered, "God, who is this man you've sent into our lives?" Outside in the driver's seat of his SUV, Maxwell once again held the photo of his late wife. He looked at it, eyes glassy with emotion, and whispered, almost like a prayer, "Claire, if you were here, I really hope, I'm doing the right thing." The morning sun was just beginning to slip past the gray clouds hanging over Chicago when a soft knock sounded at the apartment door. Emily, in the middle of helping Jonah get dressed, frowned as she approached. Her heart raced. It was too early for visitors, and her mind, conditioned by hardship, immediately braced for trouble. She slowly turned the knob and opened the door. And there he was, Maxwell Reed. This time, dressed more casually than the night before. No tie, his white shirt sleeves rolled up. In his hands, a simple brown paper bag. From it rose the comforting scent of fresh bread, hot coffee, and ripe fruit. The contrast of this man, one of the wealthiest, most powerful figures in the city, standing outside a modest apartment holding breakfast. It was so surreal, Emily thought she might still be dreaming. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, smiling that gentle smile again. the one that seemed to soften everything around him. "I just wanted to check in, see if you both slept okay, and well," he lifted the bag slightly, "I brought breakfast." Emily stood frozen for a moment, blinking as she tried to take it all in. Her first instinct was to politely refuse, to say they were fine, but it wouldn't have been true. The smell of that breakfast awakened a hunger she had almost forgotten existed. And beyond that, the gesture, this simple, quiet gesture, spoke louder than anything else ever could. "Ah, sure, please come in," she said, stepping aside awkwardly, nudging some of Jonah's scattered toys out of the way with her foot. As soon as Maxwell stepped inside, Jonah ran up to him, clutching the teddy bear, the same one Maxwell had bought him the night before. Without a moment's hesitation, Jonah stretched out his little arms. "Look, Max, this is Teddy," she said, beaming, her eyes sparkling. Maxwell immediately crouched down and picked Jonah up with such ease that even Emily was caught off guard. It was like holding a child, laughing with him, making silly voices for the teddy bear came naturally to him. And yet, deep down, Emily sensed it probably didn't. "Oh, so this is the famous Teddy?" he said, pretending to examine the stuffed animal closely. Jonah burst out laughing, a pure sound that filled the apartment with light and warmth. "Seems like a pretty cool guy," Maxwell added, nodding seriously at the bear. "I think we're going to get along just fine." Emily watched the scene unfold, clutching a coffee cup in her trembling hands. It all seemed so natural, so right, and yet so impossible. As they gathered around the small kitchen table, spreading butter over warm slices of bread and passing fruit back and forth, conversation flowed easily. Jonah talked endlessly, telling stories about adventures he'd had while living on the streets, describing them with a child's innocent lens, as though they had been little more than quirky experiences instead of the trauma they truly were. Maxwell listened carefully, smiling, but behind his eyes was a shadow, something distant and sorrowful that Emily couldn't help but notice. Eventually, Jonah excused himself and disappeared into his room to play with his new toys. The apartment quieted. Emily, still holding her cup tightly, took a breath, looked across the table, and in a soft voice asked, "Why? Why are you doing all this, Maxwell?" He didn't answer right away. He stared at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his fingers. His expression shifted. That easy, steady smile faded into something deeper, heavier, something Emily couldn't name, but that immediately squeezed at her chest. He started, clearing his throat, his voice slightly hoarse. "My wife, Claire." He paused, running a hand through his hair, his gaze drifting toward some empty corner of the table. "She passed away 3 years ago." Emily's eyes widened. Her hand went to her mouth instinctively. She wanted to say something, but the words vanished before they could form. Maxwell took a breath and went on, his voice strained, like it might fracture with the wrong word. "Our greatest dream was to have children." He closed his eyes for a moment, pressing them shut like he was holding something massive back. "We spent years trying. Treatments, travel, clinics, everything. But it never happened. And then she got sick. Cancer. Fast. Unforgiving." His voice cracked. He stopped, looked up, took another breath. "She passed before our dream could come true." The silence that followed was heavy, dense with emotion. Emily felt her throat tighten with a sudden wave of compassion. She never would have guessed that behind this composed, powerful man was such grief, so deep, so quiet, so consuming. He continued, voice lower now, rougher. "Yesterday, when I saw you two at that restaurant." He clenched his fists, his knuckles turned white. "It was like someone up there was trying to show me something, a sign, a second chance." "I don't know how to explain it," Maxwell said. I just felt like I had to do something. That maybe this is the purpose I've been searching for since she passed." Emily couldn't hold back the emotion any longer. A single tear slipped down her cheek in silence. She pressed her lips together, shaking her head gently, her eyes locked with his. "Maxwell," she whispered, her voice cracking. You're an incredible man. Truly. I don't even know what to say." He smiled, a smile still marked with sorrow, but now tinged with something else. Hope. "And you, Emily," he said softly, placing his hand gently over hers on the table, his eyes fixed on hers. "You are an incredibly strong woman, and I admire that more than you can possibly imagine." The simple touch of their hands was more than a gesture. In that moment, it was as if something unseen had bound them, an invisible thread connecting their lives. It wasn't sympathy, it wasn't charity, it was something deeper. It was connection, a rare, profound connection that needed no words to explain. Maxwell shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, and looked at her with a more businesslike expression, like he had made a decision long ago but was only now ready to speak it out loud. "Emily," he began gently but seriously, "there's an opening at one of my companies, at the property management office. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays well, has flexible hours, and you could start whenever you're ready. I think it could really help you get back on your feet." Emily brought her hands to her mouth, completely stunned. She hadn't expected that, not even in her wildest dreams, that this man would offer her not just shelter but a true, solid chance to rebuild her life. Her voice broke. She clasped her hands together, trying to hold back the tears. "I accept. Of course I accept. My God, Maxwell." She shook her head, her breath catching as she struggled to speak through the wave of emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me, to us." He smiled, squeezing her hand a little tighter. "You don't need to thank me, Emily. This is simply the right thing to do." The bond between them wasn't a fantasy. It was real, present, alive. And it wasn't about charity. It wasn't pity. It was something different. Two wounded souls who had, in some mysterious way, found each other. Two people who, without even knowing it, were slowly healing the emptiness within the other. Later that same night, Maxwell was alone in his vast, silent mansion. No matter how grand or beautiful it looked, it felt emptier than ever. He sat on the living room sofa and pulled out the old photo of Claire, the same one that always sat in a frame beside the wooden clock she had adored. He ran his fingers gently across her face in the picture, sighing deeply. His chest ached, but not only from sorrow. This time it was something else, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. "Claire," he whispered, his voice cracking, I promise you, I will take care of them, with everything I am, with everything I have." He pressed the photo to his chest, closed his eyes, and for a few seconds it felt like, whether from the stars above or the depths of his own heart, Claire was smiling at him. Months passed, like leaves drifting on the wind. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily's life began to resemble something close to normal. To hope. To a sense of stability she'd almost forgotten was possible. She had a routine now. She worked in the administrative office of one of Maxwell's companies, a sleek, modern building of glass and steel right in the heart of downtown Chicago. Her paycheck was more than enough. It allowed her to live with dignity, to cover all the bills, put food on the table, and most importantly, to give Jonah the kind of life that once seemed like a dream too distant to even imagine. Jonah, in turn, had started preschool. A warm, cheerful little place just a few blocks from the apartment Maxwell had given them. Every morning, he would run through the gates clutching his teddy bear, eyes shining. He smiled more than he cried. He ran more than he hid. He laughed, he played, he sang. Finally, just being a kid, a free, joyful, safe child. But perhaps what surprised Emily the most, what moved her more than anything, was how present Maxwell had become. It wasn't the distant, obligatory kind of presence born from charity or guilt. No, it was something much deeper, genuine, soulful. Maxwell didn't just check in, he showed up. He insisted on picking Jonah up from school, often arriving before Emily even finished work, just to take him to the park. He knelt in the grass. He laughed with Jonah. He built sandcastles like it was the most important thing in the world. He played hide and seek with such dedication that sometimes he pretended not to find Jonah, just to keep hearing that sweet giggle a little longer. Giggles that somehow eased every old scar still lingering in his chest. "Mommy," Jonah would call out, cheeks red from running around the park. "Uncle Max knows how to fly a real airplane. Watch." Maxwell would scoop him up under the arms, lift him high into the sky, and spin him around while making loud airplane noises. "Vroom, control tower, we are cleared for takeoff. This is Captain Max. Passenger Jonah, prepare for landing in Tickletown." And with that, Maxwell would gently lay Jonah down in the grass, covering him with tickles, pulling out laughter that seemed to brighten all of Grant Park. From a distance, Emily watched, and every time she saw that scene, her heart tightened. But not with pain. With something warm, something she hadn't felt in years. That man, the one the world knew as cold, calculated, unshakable, was in front of Jonah, in front of her, simply love in human form. It was one of those sunny afternoons, while walking hand in hand down a quiet sidewalk, that something unexpected happened. Emily suddenly stopped, eyes locked on a familiar scene. A child, alone, curled in a corner near an alleyway, hugging their knees for warmth and protection from the world. Without thinking, Emily let go of Jonah's hand, shrugged off her own coat, the only coat she had, and walked quickly toward the child. With no hesitation, she knelt before them. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pause. She just wrapped the coat around them, the way a mother would shelter her own. "Here? This will keep you a little warmer," she said, voice thick with emotion, as she gently brushed the tangled hair away from the child's face. Maxwell froze in place, watching. His chest tightened, but this time, not from grief or regret. It was something else. His lung, buried behind years of silence and steel, beat differently now. Stronger. Guame. It was as if, in that single moment, he finally saw something he'd never known how to name until now. "Oh my God," he thought, running a hand over his lips, trying to mask the surge of emotion rising in him. "She's different. She's everything. She's exactly what I didn't even know I was searching for." That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, Maxwell couldn't sleep. The day's memories replayed in his mind like a film. Emily's quiet smile, her kindness, her courage, her just being who she was, pure, generous, extraordinary. And Jonah, his laughter, his tiny hand clutching Maxwell's as if he were some kind of hero, that blind, childlike trust that melts even the hardest hearts. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to be with them. He needed to make it real. Grabbing his phone, he inhaled deeply. Before hesitation could take over, he dialed. "Hello?" Emily's voice answered, sweet, slightly surprised. "Hey," he said. His voice came out softer than expected, but filled with purpose. "I was wondering, would you and Jonah like to have a picnic with me this Saturday?" There was a moment of quiet on the other end, and then he heard it. That smile. That voice that already felt like music to his soul. "Of course, Max. Jonah's going to love that. And so will I." Saturday dawned perfect. The sky was a shade of blue so deep, it looked like a painting. It looked like a painting. The sky, the air, the colors. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from the edge of the park. Maxwell, as always, arrived early. He laid everything out, a soft blanket stretched across the grass, a wicker basket filled with fresh bread, ripe fruits, juices, and warm pastries. He even brought balloons, because, according to him, no picnic with Jonah would be complete without them. When Emily and Jonah arrived, he welcomed them with that wide, unmistakable smile, and Jonah ran straight into his arms. "Uncle Max," Jonah shouted, leaping into his embrace. "You brought balloons! You're the best in the whole world!" "And you, my favorite co-pilot," Maxwell replied, hugging him tight. The day passed in a stream of laughter, shared bites of food, playful games, and lingering glances. So many glances. Glances that spoke more than words ever could, filled with unspoken thoughts, with longing, with uncertainty, but most of all with that powerful, quietly growing feeling that had taken root between them. At one point, while chasing Jonah in a game of tag, Emily stumbled over a hidden root in the grass. It happened fast. She tried to steady herself, arms flailing, but she was already falling. Without hesitation, Maxwell lunged forward, caught her by the waist, and pulled her close, against his chest. Time stopped. They stood like that, too close. So close, Emily could breathe in his cologne, that blend of sandalwood and something warm and familiar, the kind of scent that makes you feel safe. So close Maxwell could feel the heat from her cheeks against his skin, could hear her breath shift. His hands tightened around her waist, as if holding her was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Her palms, trembling, pressed against his chest, where his heart thudded fast and loud and uneven, their eyes locked. And in that second, both of them knew there was no going back, no more pretending. This wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't charity. It was love. It was surrender. It was fate. Without thinking, Maxwell raised one hand, gently cupping her face, tracing his fingers down her jawline until they settled softly behind her neck. "Emily," he whispered, his voice low, shaky. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her eyes said everything. And then he kissed her, a kiss that was tender, gentle, but overflowing with urgency, with all the words left unsaid for months, with every dream once thought impossible. Everything else faded away, the sounds of kids playing, birds calling, even the breeze. It was just them. When they finally pulled apart, Emily took a shaky breath, her eyes shining, her smile unsure, overwhelmed. "Maxwell," she tried to say, but her voice failed her. He held her hands, gripping them like he would never let go. He looked into her eyes with a conviction so strong it made her hands tremble. "Emily," his voice came out steady, sure. "Will you be my girlfriend?" She didn't need to think, didn't need to hesitate. "Yes," she replied, her smile blooming as her heart burst with joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." And in that moment, in that Chicago park, in that small piece of the world, a new story began. A story of love, of healing, of beginnings. A story their entire lives had been waiting to write. Emily and Maxwell's relationship blossomed in a way that even the most cynical had to admit was rare, almost sacred. It wasn't about wealth or luxury or extravagant gestures. It was about presence, about care, about showing up time and time again, about laughing together over a burnt pancake or Jonah knocking over a full cup of juice on the kitchen floor. Jonah, by the way, wasn't just a part of the story, he was the heart of it. From day one, Maxwell made it clear. This wasn't just us two. It was us three. He made sure Jonah was included in everything. Sunday brunches, strolls in the park, movie nights with animated films Jonah picked and made them both watch under one blanket with popcorn in every lap. And the little boy who once clung nervously behind his mother's leg now ran freely, boldly, joyfully. His smile had returned and stayed. Eventually, the love he felt for Maxwell took on a title all its own. "Mommy, is my superhero picking me up from school today?" Jonah would ask, bouncing on the bed, hugging his teddy bear. "Yes, baby. He said he'd be there before the bell rings," Emily would reply, adjusting his uniform with a smile. Maxwell would overhear from the other room, and each time a warmth would grow in his chest, one he couldn't quite explain. A love so full, so complete, it overflowed, as if everything he'd ever searched for in life had finally taken form. In Emily's smile, in Jonah's laughter, in the belonging he thought he'd never feel again. But what had first drawn him to Emily, what continued to light up his admiration, was her essence. She wasn't just kind, she was light. A light that filled every room she entered. A light that didn't dim, even in the stormiest moments. She didn't only care for those she loved, she cared for everyone who needed it, even strangers. And it was on one chilly Friday night, as wind blew through the narrow city streets, that Emily, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a warm cup of tea, looked over at Maxwell, who was reading beside her, and said, "Love, I'm going out tonight to hand out soup to the homeless. Want to come with me?" Maxwell, caught off guard by the invitation, slowly lowered his book and raised an eyebrow. "Hand out soup?" he asked, curious, almost surprised. "Do you do this often?" She smiled, that way only she could, and replied, "Whenever I can." "Even before I met you," Emily said softly, "when I had almost nothing myself, I made a promise that if I ever had just a little more, I'd never forget the people who still have nothing." Her eyes sparkled, steady, kind. "And well, it's not much, but it helps." For a moment, Maxwell said nothing. He simply looked at her, this extraordinary woman who had completely transformed his life, and realized once again that she wasn't just strong. She was made of something else entirely, something rare, something that lived somewhere between empathy, love, and courage. He smiled, shaking his head, half in awe, half in love. "It's unbelievable," he said quietly, bringing a hand to her cheek, gently brushing it with his thumb. "You really are made of light, Emily." Then, without a second of hesitation, he added, "Of course I'll go. Just tell me when." That night, they met a small group of volunteers, gathered in a downtown Chicago square. There were folding tables, large pots of hot soup, baskets of bread, and thermoses filled with coffee. The smell of the food mixed with the damp scent of rain-soaked pavement. The cold bit into the skin of anyone without a coat. Emily didn't just serve soup, she knelt. She made eye contact. She asked names. She asked if people had a place to sleep, if they needed anything beyond food. "Here you go, Mr. Antonio," she said, handing a plate to an older man. "Tonight, it's bean and veggie soup, and I brought some fresh warm bread. We'll be here again tomorrow, okay?" The man, gray-bearded with deeply lined eyes, took the plate like it was a wrapped gift under a Christmas tree. "God bless you, sweetheart," he whispered. You don't know what this means to me." Maxwell stood still, a ladle in his hand, momentarily frozen. He had closed million-dollar deals, sat at polished boardroom tables, flown across the globe for business. But never, not once, had he felt so small, so grounded, and so deeply moved. He filled a plate, scanning the line, faces that the world had rendered invisible, people ignored, forgotten, discarded, and then, like lightning, it hit him. That sudden realization, clear, certain, unshakable. Maxwell dropped the ladle. He looked at Emily, who was just then smiling as she draped a blanket over the shoulders of an elderly woman. And before he even realized he was speaking, the words left his lips. "What?" "If what?" Emily asked, her voice low. "If we created a center," Maxwell said. "A real place, not just to hand out food, but to offer shelter, medical care, therapy, job training, a space to restore dignity." Emily froze. Her eyes blinked like she had to make sure she'd heard correctly. "Maxwell," her voice trembled, her eyes filled with tears. That would be." She choked on the words, then reached out, grabbing his hand tightly. "You have no idea how much that would mean." He held her gaze. His eyes lit with unwavering resolve, the kind that made it feel like the dream had already become reality. "I want to do this, Emily, and not just that." He took a deep breath, like he was crossing a threshold inside himself. "I want you to be one of the leaders. I want you to help me build it." He leaned in slightly, his voice now soft, certain. "You know what these people need. You have the heart this project requires. I only have the resources, but you have the soul." Emily was stunned. She couldn't speak. Her chest tightened. Her hand squeezed his like it was the only thing keeping her grounded in reality. And then, without a word, she dropped the plates she'd been holding and threw her arms around him. Like someone embracing a future. Like someone holding on to a once-in-a-lifetime chance to change the world. "I accept," she whispered, her voice cracking, her cheek resting against his chest. "I'm with you, Maxwell. For this. For everything." And there, in the middle of that cold Chicago square, among a crowd of forgotten faces, something greater than any shelter was born. A project built on love, on hope, on healing. A reminder that when two souls come together, not just to survive, but to make a difference, love doesn't only transform the people who feel it, it transforms the entire world around them. The community center they built together quickly grew into something much greater than either had imagined. It wasn't just a shelter. It wasn't just a place for aid. It was a refuge, a sanctuary, a bright spot in the city, where lives that had once been invisible now had names, voices, and dignity. Emily, who once had to beg for food and sleep on shelter floors, was now thriving in a way that felt almost miraculous. She became a respected leader, admired not only by volunteers, but by every person who stepped through the center's doors. The fear and uncertainty that once clouded her gaze had been replaced with confidence, with warmth, with a strength that lifted others. Every morning she arrived early, greeted with hugs, waves, and radiant smiles. There was a dining hall serving over 200 meals a day, a medical wing with doctors and nurses offering free care, therapists, social workers, training rooms filled with people learning skills to take back their lives. People came to learn sewing, carpentry, cooking, and computer skills. It became a factory of new beginnings. Children played in the courtyard, drawing on the sidewalks, their laughter echoing through the air, while their mothers attended support groups or took part in skills classes. Teenagers, many of whom had once slept under bridges, were now learning trades, dreaming about careers, making real plans for the future. And all of it, everything, had a name. Or rather, two. Emily and Maxwell. But if you asked her, she would only smile and say, "This isn't about me. It's about what happens when people believe in each other." Maxwell, meanwhile, would watch it all with a heart bursting with pride. Every smile returned, every life rebuilt, every story of hope that emerged from that place reminded him just how deep his love had grown, for Emily, for Jonah, for everything they had created together. It wasn't just love anymore. It was legacy. It was healing. It was the meaning he never knew he was missing. But even surrounded by so much love and purpose, Maxwell carried within him a growing certainty, one that had quietly settled deep inside his chest. He wanted forever. He wanted to build not just a center, not just a mission, but a home, a family, a life story. And one morning, with sunlight pouring through the tall windows of their Chicago apartment, he woke up with his heart pounding. There was no more reason to wait. He got up, grabbed his phone, and began making calls. First, to the manager of a very special restaurant, the same restaurant where everything had started months ago, where he had first seen Jonah smile, where Emily had first let her guard down, where his heart had already started falling for her, even if he didn't realize it yet. "I want the best table," he said. "No, scratch that. I want the entire place. It has to be perfect. Lights, flowers, everything." Next, he stopped by a small jewelry shop. He didn't want something extravagant, just something meaningful. He chose a delicate gold ring, set with a single blue sapphire at its center. Simple, timeless, perfect. The sapphire, symbolizing truth, loyalty, and eternal love, felt exactly right. That evening, he arrived to pick up Emily and Jonah. As soon as they got into the car, Maxwell turned in his seat with a grin and pulled 2 blindfolds from his pocket. "Put these on," he said, holding them out with playful seriousness. "Do you trust me?" Emily raised an eyebrow, laughing. "Maxwell, what are you up to?" But Jonah was already slipping his on, bouncing in his seat. "I trust you," he giggled. "This is going to be awesome." Emily laughed softly, and Maxwell just smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Just trust me, love," he said. "I promise, it's worth it." The car rolled through the streets of Chicago, and with their blindfolds on, every turn felt like a mystery. Jonah made wild, silly guesses from the back seat. "Are we going to the zoo, or a spaceship museum, or an amusement park?" Maxwell chuckled, but gave away nothing. Finally, the car came to a stop. He got out first, hurried around to their side, and opened the door, reaching for both of their hands. "Ready?" he asked, eyes twinkling with a blend of nerves and excitement. "Ready," Emily said through laughter. He slowly removed their blindfolds, and in that moment, Emily froze. Her hands flew up to cover her mouth, her eyes instantly brimming with tears. They stood before the restaurant, the very one where it had all begun. Only now it had been transformed. Hundreds of tiny lights hung from nearby trees, twinkling like stars pulled down from the sky just to light this moment. A path of rose petals led to a single table in the center of the room, set with white flowers, glowing candles, and soft music playing from a nearby piano. It was the same song from that night, the night everything changed. "This place," Emily whispered, her hand pressed to her chest. "My God, this place changed everything." Maxwell took a deep breath, the emotion tugging at his voice. "Yes," he said, eyes locked on hers. "It changed our lives." And then he knelt, right there in the center of that sparkling, glowing room. He opened a small velvet box, revealing the sapphire ring, its delicate shine catching the candlelight. Taking her trembling hand, he looked up, his voice thick with feeling. "Emily Hart," he said, "you came into my life when I least expected it. You showed me that love doesn't follow a timeline, that it doesn't need a plan. You taught me that family isn't just who we're born to, but who we choose to walk beside us." He took another deep breath, his heart racing. "And if you'll let me, I want to walk beside you forever. Emily, will you marry me?" For a moment the world stood still. Time seemed to pause. It was just the 3 of them. Emily couldn't even try to stop the tears. They poured down her face. Tears of joy, of disbelief, of love. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Jonah burst forward and wrapped his arms around both of them in a joyful tackle hug. "I'm gonna have a daddy," he yelled, grinning ear to ear. "A real daddy." All around them, the few secret guests, friends, volunteers from the center, and even the restaurant staff, clapped and wiped away tears. Emily cupped Maxwell's face in her hands, laughing and crying all at once. And through the overwhelming joy, she whispered, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes, 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 Maxwell, yes," Emily whispered, her voice catching in her throat as tears streamed down her cheeks. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and their lips met in a kiss that sealed not just a promise, but a whole new beginning. A beginning filled with love, with healing, with home. And in that moment, with Maxwell holding Jonah, the child who, in her heart, had become his, Emily realized, after all the battles, the heartbreaks, the long nights and uncertain days, she had not just found love. She had found a place to belong. A real home. Outside, in the clear Chicago sky, a single star seemed to shine brighter than the rest. Maybe a sign, maybe the universe smiling gently down at her. You did it. The morning of their wedding dawned under a sky so blue it looked painted. No clouds, no doubt, just light and warmth. The breeze was soft, dancing with the garden leaves. The scent of blooming flowers lingered in the air, lavender, roses, sunflowers, wrapping around the guests like a gentle embrace. The setting was perfect, not lavish, not extravagant, but intimate. A garden filled with wildflowers and white roses. A place that reflected everything they'd built: simplicity, beauty, rebirth, just like their love. There were no crowds, only a small group, just as they'd dreamed, close friends, the volunteers and staff from the community center, and most importantly, the families, the very people their work had touched. People who, like Emily once had hit rock bottom and were now standing tall, rewriting their stories with courage. Chairs formed a semicircle, each one wrapped with olive branches and delicate lanterns. The altar was a graceful arch of intertwined branches, sheer white fabric and fresh blooms. A string quartet played softly in the background, casting a dreamlike calm over the garden. Then the music shifted. Everyone turned to look, and there she was. Jonah walked slowly, dressed in a little white suit vest with a flower pinned to his chest. In his hands he held a small pillow with the rings. But halfway down the aisle he stopped. His eyes had found Maxwell's, and in that moment, the world around them faded away. He broke into a run, forgetting the formalities, and leapt straight into Maxwell's arms. "I love you, Daddy," Jonah whispered, staring into his tear-filled eyes. Maxwell dropped to his knees right there in the grass, overcome with emotion. His voice shook as he held Jonah's small hands with every ounce of tenderness a father can give. "I love you too, my little man," Maxwell whispered, his voice tight with emotion. He wrapped Jonah in a hug so strong, so full of warmth, it felt like it could hold the moment in place forever. Every guest wiped their eyes, moved beyond words. There wasn't a single person untouched by the scene unfolding in front of them. Jonah carefully placed the rings on the wooden holder at the front of the altar, and as he stepped aside, the music shifted once again. Without prompting, everyone stood. And then she appeared. Emily. She walked slowly, gracefully, wearing a simple white dress. No sequins, no glitter, just soft, flowing fabric that moved gently with the breeze. Her hair was delicately pinned, adorned with small white flowers, and her eyes held a light that spoke of love, gratitude, and strength. Seeing her, Maxwell felt his breath catch, his heart thundered in his chest, his vision blurred with tears. His hands trembled, and right then, in that single instant, he knew, without a shadow of doubt, he would never be alone again. Never. When she reached him at the altar, she smiled, and that smile, it dissolved every fear, every scar, every last remnant of pain. As they stood hand in hand, the officiant simply smiled. No long speech was needed. The love between them was loud enough. Maxwell took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. Then, slowly, with a voice that trembled but never faltered, he began his vows. "Emily," he said, "you came into my life like a breath of hope. Just when I thought it was no longer possible to begin again. I thought I had lost everything, that I'd never know love again. But then, there you were." He squeezed her hands and tears streamed freely down his face. "You taught me that love can be reborn, that life gives us new chances even when everything feels lost. You showed me beauty in simplicity, strength in vulnerability, and that love truly heals." He paused, swallowing hard. "I promise to be your safe place on hard days, your partner through all seasons, the good and the bad. I promise to hold your hand every step of the way. I promise to love you and our son as the most precious gift in my life, every single day until my very last breath." Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks now too, and though she trembled, her voice came out clear, full of love and surrender. "Maxwell," she whispered, "when I met you, I only knew how to survive. I was lost, tired, and deep down, I believed I didn't deserve happiness anymore." She paused, smiling through the tears. "But you showed me that angels still walk this earth. That love has no manual, no perfect moment, no flawless script," Emily whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Love is about choosing, every single day, to be a safe place, to be shelter, to be home." She lifted her hand, gently caressing Maxwell's cheek. "You taught me to believe again," she continued softly. "And today, I choose you. I choose you to be my partner, my best friend, my love, and the most amazing father our son could ever dream of. I promise to walk beside you through every storm, every joy. I promise to love you forever." For a moment, the entire garden stood still. Volunteers blinked back tears. Children clung to one another. Even the officiant took a moment to compose himself before speaking again. Then, with hands trembling with emotion, Emily and Maxwell exchanged rings, slipping them onto each other's fingers with a reverence that made clear this wasn't just about a ceremony. It was about a life rebuilt with love, a life reclaimed, a life made whole. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, his voice warm, his eyes glistening. "You may kiss the bride." And in that moment, under the open Chicago sky, their lips met in a kiss so full of meaning it seemed to quiet the entire world. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a vow, a healing, a homecoming. Jonah, unable to stay still, ran to them with open arms and a giant grin. "Now we're a real family," he shouted joyfully. Laughter and applause erupted, filling the garden with a warmth that seemed to rise straight from the earth. And there, under the soft breeze, amidst white roses and sunflowers, surrounded by those whose lives they'd touched, they didn't just seal a marriage, they sealed a love story that no time could ever erase. Because love like this is eternal. So the story has come to a close, dear friends. And if you're still here, right now, it means something about this journey touched you, didn't it? Maybe it reached into a quiet place inside you and reminded you of something you'd forgotten. The simple power of love. The strength that lives in the most ordinary of people, and how healing often begins in the gentlest, most unexpected ways. Emily and Maxwell's story isn't about fairy tales or perfection. It's about finding hope in the middle of the storm. It's about kindness that doesn't ask for anything in return. And most of all, it's about the truth we sometimes forget in our fast-moving world. Real strength is soft. It listens. It shows up. It chooses love over and over again. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's exactly what Maxwell did. And that's what Emily reminded us. No matter how broken life may feel, we can rise. We can love again. We can give, even when we have little. Because healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's soup in the cold, a safe hand to hold, or a single moment of being seen. So now, take this story with you. Let it soften the way you see the world. Let it nudge you to look closer at the people you pass every day. We never know who might be carrying a story like Emily's, or a heart like Maxwell's. And if this story moved you, if it stayed with you even for a little while, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It's not just a click. It's a way of saying, I see this, I feel this, I believe in this. Until next time, stay kind, stay human, and stay open to the miracles hiding in plain sight.